All right, everybody at the start of the day, good morning. Everybody right in the middle, good afternoon. And all y'all way in the back of the day, good evening. There may not be many of you, but you all have one thing in common, and that is you are listening to IndieDev right now, whenever that may be. I'm your host, as always, John McCullough. I am the programmer here at Graphite Lab, the finest independent game development studio right here in the heart of St. Louis, Missouri. And I am with my two dear friends. I got Miss Sam Wade and I got Mr. Matt Raithel.
Hey everybody. John, your introduction has become much more robust.
They're getting better. Like, you know, I try.
That's good. It's a hearty welcome versus just, your Cronkite style good afternoon and evening and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, it's good.
You always got to start strong, I guess.
Good. I hope we finish strong as well.
Yeah.
We'll don't want it to be all downhill.
Well, we'll see how this goes.
Okay.
I'm feeling pretty surly today.
There you go.
I don't know about you. Matt Raithel, you haven't been on since, I think, before the interns started.
It's possible. I think the first week with the interns, me and Brad did one. So that would have probably been
that's right. Yeah.
Probably been the last time. Mm-hmm. It's been a while. It's been going good.
How have they been doing? On a scale from, 0 terrible to 10, kind of okay.
I think they've been doing a fantastic job.
So that's like a 6.
Well, we'll say a solid 7. Again, strong start, hopefully strong finish. Mm-hmm. We've had 3 classes of interns so far, and they all, bring different skill sets to the table. What I think is interesting about this class is they come from different universities. Sam with us today, all the way down at Ringling, and up in the past we've only done interns that have come locally from St. Louis schools. So it's nice to kind of branch out, and we've been very pleased so far.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear
that. Sam, I talked with Jillian last week, and we talked about Pixel Press, but I want to hear what you have to say about our dear friends at Pixel Press. You've been doing a lot of animating for their I guess, what would you call it?
Pixel Press, if those of you listening, it's the first time you've heard of it, it's a application for mobile devices. It allows you to draw video game levels similar to Mario Brothers on graph paper, take a picture of it with the camera on the device, which then converts it into a playable level before your very eyes. Mm-hmm. And what Sam has been working on, I'll let her tell in more detail, but essentially creating content for that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've just been working on putting together our own kind of content pack, and Jillian and I, that is. And it's been really cool. We've we're working on animating right now and getting it all finished up so that it can kind of get put in, and it'll be really cool to see it put together and see all of our stuff, our hard work kind of come together. And
so how's the whole process work? Is it just this, Jillian stand up and say, "Get to work, you peon," and then he's just like, "Okay," or how's it been working with?
No, she's not that. No, we're just we've been working together. Yeah, we kind of like splitting the loads so that we're both kind of doing the same amount of work and trying to kind of combine both of our styles, come up with something that's more unified, and talk to each other and see what each other are doing and catch up, kind of keep on the same page.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And more specifically, the work you guys are doing, creating an art pack consists of a handful of different things. So run through the list, because there's a lot of things, even though they're categorized into a few categories, but there's quite a lot of content you're producing. Tell us about that content.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to design 4 characters that are playable, that the player can choose from, and then 2 villains, and then we have to do the animations for all 6 of those, and then we have to do like terrain, ladders, hazards, coins that you can collect when you're running through the levels. What else? You have to do the particles.
Sure. Quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
And for those of you that haven't tried it out, it's a free download. You should check it out. Pixel Press Floors is the first version. They're planning other versions. Floors is the one that kind of replicates the original Super Mario Brothers style. side-scrolling 2D platformer. And so that's the one we're building content for right now. So you should be able to download that content in a couple of weeks, months, we'll see. This is the first time that they're using a third party to create content for their system. So being good friends with that team, it's exciting for us to be a part of it and eventually have the content that Sam and others on the team are producing in and downloadable with Pixel Press so that you can download that art and use them in creating your own levels.
Exciting stuff. Have you been doing anything else? Like do we ever doing any other projects? Or is it just been...
You started with a lot of kind of more marketing stuff, just kind of getting your feet wet. And this Pixel Press opportunity was kind of coincidental. It was kind of opportunistic in that they were expanding their library and portfolio, and we're close friends with them in the team. So once we found out about that opportunity, we instantly got Sam here connected with it based on your animation and art illustration skills. But then we've kind of had to put a lot of time into that process. We evaluated, thought maybe it'd take a couple of weeks, but it's been beyond that just in the amount of content we've had to produce.
Has that just been like straight animation, like all animation you're spending like all your time on?
Well, right now it is, but before I was also designing like the textures and stuff like that.
I see.
The assets. But yeah, I mean, simultaneously we've also been kind of working on the intern project slowly.
Sure.
Yeah. But mostly it's been Pixel Press.
And that's part of your your learning and education is you balance the client projects and the internal projects, and that's just kind of how we have to do things.
It's a struggle we face every day.
Yeah, so it's good. We like to set it up so that the client projects we work on are fun and enjoyable. But yeah, you got to definitely work out the balance. But then you guys did all the character creation too. So this isn't just assembly. This is also a lot of coming up with, designing what this thing is. There's kind of a story behind each of their content packs. So this is one where Sam and the rest of the crew developed this story around a zoo that had become cursed. And so you're kind of, you pick from a collection of the animals that can then go and collect special jewelies that remove the curse. So these are zombified monkeys. And then who else do we have?
We have a monkey, alligator, crocodile, and lion.
Right.
Yeah. And then the villains are the evil zookeepers.
Right. So, possessed by, I don't know, whatever zookeepers get possessed by.
I don't even know if they are possessed. They're just like evil.
Yeah.
They're bad to the animals.
Yeah.
Abusive.
This is a bad zoo. This is not, and it's kind of ironic being that St. Louis is home to like one of the best zoos in the world, where the zookeepers are very friendly, nice, and the animals are not zombies, unfortunately. But it's been cool to see all the work that you guys have been doing. It's very, very cool, and we'll keep everyone posted on when that content hits the virtual shelf.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff you've been doing, I think, looks just fantastic, and I can't wait till that stuff comes out. I was telling Jillian last week, to be an intern and then have like stuff actually be launched, like to create a thing and then do it and then have it come out, I think is just a really fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I was an intern, elsewhere, and I didn't get to do anything nearly that cool.
Where was your intern experience, John?
We talked about it last week, but real quick.
Okay.
I was at Chewy Software.
That's right, I knew that.
Wasn't it?
I remember you saying that now.
Oh, yeah.
I knew that.
Yeah, Chewy Software, and I had to port one of their iOS apps to Android, but it was all done in Unity, so, that's not really a tough process.
I see. Gotcha.
Anyway, let's talk more about animation, because I've been thinking, and I can't, I don't keep up with it as much as I used to. I used to animate like a bunch. Like I used to be into like 3D and all that stuff. And I got into like Blender 3D stuff in high school. Yeah. So I did a bunch of that. And I made some walk cycles and stuff. Nothing huge, but like outside of, better tools, I guess, and learning about linear interpolation and things like that, has there really been...
That's a good buzzword.
Yeah, you use it a bunch when you get into programming, but...
Sure.
has there been like any real big advancements to like the process of animating a figure? Or is it still just kind of frame, then frame, then frame, you know, kind of regardless of how you make those frames?
How far back do you want us to go?
All the way.
All the way.
I want cavemen on walls.
Well, we've developed quite a bit since then.
Sure. Well, I will. I'll just touch on it from one particular perspective, and then I'll turn it over to Sam because she's still in school using the hot suite tools. But kind of where I want to come from is, at least from the animation instruction that I do at Maryville here in St. Louis, is still based upon animation principles that were set forth by Disney. So even we do motion graphics animation where students will take what they know about animation and apply it to a bouncing, flashing logo, those principles still come into play. So from my perspective, I would say the principles stay the same. Just like in drawing or illustration, principles of anatomy, composition, color, form, shape, those should still be the foundation for any illustration education. And for me, any motion education, animation, should be built on those principles of starting from the top down. I don't know if I can do all 12, but squash and stretch. Things keep their volume, but to make them more playful or more lively, you can distort their vertical or horizontal shape to make them feel more bouncy or more fluid. Anticipation, the idea that when you're going to start an animation, there might be a bit of a kind of a warm-up to the animation, like a batter will pull the bat back over their shoulder before they swing forward, or a pitcher would wind up before they throw the pitch. So these principles we see, in my opinion, in the best animations, whether they're 2D or 3D, those principles stay the same. How the tools have evolved, I will pass over a little bit to Sam, and then I'll probably cherry pick a few things and say, back in my day, we did it this way, right? Because certainly, you know, everything from computer processing power to the tool sets have gotten much more established. But I'll turn it over to Sam for a little bit, and she can tell you what she's using that's probably cutting edge down at Ringling.
Like what he said is true. The principles are always going to be the same no matter what medium you're animating in, like whether it's 2D or 3D or stop motion. It's the same kind of rules that make animation look good, but it's the tools that change and just kind of make the process easier for the animator. Like, for example, at Ringling we use Maya, and even, like, I was looking through those books that you put on my desk the other day that were, like, it was, like, the catalog for Ringling from 2005, and it has all the technology that they used back then, and it's, like, how different it is from then and now, and, like, the things that we can, it's, like, the things that we can make now, they look better because it's easier to make them look better in a shorter amount of time. So, yeah, and the tools, like, there's always, like, programmers mostly that kind of make the tools more convenient for us to use.
Do you know much about the hardware that you use at Ringling? Like what the processors are, what the RAM is, or anything like that?
No, we don't really learn about that kind of stuff. But,
well, because I was just going to, because I remember when we started, I've got a lot of that back in my day type of information. Like when I went through a 3D program down in Springfield, Missouri, animation program, you know, we were working on single 15-inch CRT monitors, right? And had the computers were 500 megahertz computers, and they had 128 megs of RAM, right? So, like, these are really archaic beasts. But when we were working on those machines, popular 3D movies at the time was Toy Story and Bug's Life. So I would imagine that Pixar had better machines, right? Yeah. But still, those were kind of the threshold for home machines for computer animation at the time. Fast forward now 10 years, and I would hope that Ringling's not using 15-inch CRTs. I think we can bank on that. But certainly, you know, bigger, better displays, more displays, better processors and equipment, but also better tools.
Yeah, and we use the RenderMan software from Pixar there, which is kind of interesting because even that's sort of out of date now because, for example, DreamWorks just kind of came out with this new software called Apollo, or I think that's the animation software, and then Primo's the whole kind of suite. which makes it even more easy to animate because now it's like real time when you adjust like one of the joints on a face or something, you can see it immediately. You don't have to type in numbers or wait like 30 seconds for something to change.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think with the lighting software, which I'm not that familiar with, you know how if you want to render something to see how something looks, it takes a couple minutes. But I think with that, it's real time. Like it's immediately change something and you can see how it looks.
Right.
Which makes it a lot easier and faster and makes it look better because you don't have to sit there for so long trying to get one minute change in something.
Bringing this over into the programming realm, like if you've ever read about like Gates and other programmers way back in the day when they were working on the mainframes where they spent like all their time programming, where to see if a piece of code worked, they had to run it through and actually have it like printed out and then processed. So it took them like an hour to check their code.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing where, you know, for I guess me, again, 2004 was when I finished my degree. We had to wait, you know, sometimes minutes to hours just to see how something would look that we kind of set up in the scene. At the time, actually, other movies. So I started in 2000, but by 2004, Monsters Inc. had come out, and this is where you know, fur and other cloth dynamics were being debuted, and kind of a global scale in a film. And some of those scenes, even with Pixar's hardware capabilities, were taking upwards of 90 hours to render. So if you think about there being 30 frames in a second and 90 hours per frame to render. You know, 9 times 3 is what, 180? So if we take...
9 times 3 is 18.
Right,
so
18,
90,
but if we add...
180, yeah.
Right, so we're talking about having...
You're right. We're good.
So we're talking about doing, you know, what would it then be, 1,800 total hours to render those 30 frames?
That's crazy. That's like a week.
Right?
How long is it?
It's quite a long time. So those of you listening, pull out your abacus and do all that math yourself and figure out how long. But and at the time, even network rendering was even being pioneered and used. So the idea up to that point was you had to render out each of those frames on a computer, an individual computer, and then assemble those in a final computer so that you could have multiple computers rendering each of those frames simultaneously. Well, now they have network rendering where you can take your animation file, submit it. Some of them are even like online systems now where you can just submit your scenes.
That's what we do.
Online. You use an online system?
Yeah, we use, I don't even know what it's called, but we send it all to like it's called the render farm, I guess. You send it there, and you can just log off and come back the next day.
Right, and it's all ready.
You don't have to hook up all your computers after everyone's left and then sleep there overnight and then you know, maybe by morning have a...
So think about not even necessarily tools, but just systems in place for taking away some of those limits. I know now at Missouri State, where I went, they've got render farms set up within the studios, but they also have all the computers like within the university being pulled. So they have, at one point, they were even pulling the computers from the libraries. So basically any computer at the library that was idle, it would pull its processing power and try and help render. But they used the render farm at the university for a while, but that was after I'd left. So, so software from Maya to Lightwave to 3D Studio Max had to develop network rendering systems and stuff to make that process go faster. So it's, there's lots of fun things. I would say it's a pretty... intensely innovating industry, the 3D animation side of things, over the last 10 years for sure. Yeah.
For sure.
Fun. It's been a fun one to be a part of, even though I'm not like in it every day now.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
But it'll still always just be like a skill-driven thing. Like, people are always like, oh, if technology gets too far, then they won't even need to hire people because computers can do it. But with
Heresy.
animation,
Ain't that the truth?
With animation, it's not really that way because you still, like, a computer can get super advanced, but it'll never be able to make life the way a human can, you know, with the principles that we were talking about earlier. And
not until we hook it up to the global camera grid, and then it's just got just all the time, everybody's recorded everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just draws from that, and it knows what every possible human motion could possibly look like.
But then you're getting into Uncanny Valley kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like Asimov's iRobot, right? Where the robot, I forget the guy's name in the book, but basically asks the robot if it can generate a masterpiece. And the robot responds very quickly, I can, but can you? Yeah. So
good question.
Yeah. So it's this idea that creating life from things. The way I kind of teach it, and the way I think that it's most successful, isn't always necessarily about representing reality, but representing believability. Mm-hmm. Right? We as animators don't always create things that are super realistic. If a person jumps off a building and they crash into the concrete, how that happens in real life could be very different than how it happens in an animated cartoon where they squish and all kinds of puffs of smoke do cute little spiralies and other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So we are kind of fabricating a new reality. I think the best animators fabricate this new reality, but it's a believable one, to where if something's doesn't quite jive with a person's perception, Sam had said the uncanny valley earlier, which is the idea that things can look so close to real but miss that little bitty part where our human minds reject it as reality. Mm-hmm. So if you create something that's believable, it doesn't necessarily have to be realistic. And that's something that I think we as trained animators can get. It's kind of that tilt factor, that almost like charisma, where good animators understand how to do it, but it's hard to really program that. It's hard to train something else to run through a formula and come up with that successful combination or recipe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you can't rely on a computer, no matter how good the technology gets. You can't rely on it to make something look like the way you would expect it to look, or just kind of change it to be more creative. Yeah. So, the technology may get better, but it's still the animator, the artist behind it that's making it.
I think so.
Good.
It's like recipe, taste change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
while we're talking about computers making stuff, I saw an article however long ago, but it was someone made a program to create a game entirely on its own. So what it did is it scoured the web, and then it found like a rendering engine and downloaded it, and then you somehow figured out how to use it, and then it found all these assets and somehow hooked it up. I don't know how the whole thing worked, but what it wound up was a game. It was a first-person game, and you had to go and collect like sailboats. Yeah, there were like little sailboats kind of floating, and then there was like big red like monsters kind of walking around. They didn't animate, but they just kind of like skated around. Yeah. And then if you collect all the sailboats, then you won. And then it made the monsters red because after scouring the internet for scary things, it determined red is a scary color.
Interesting.
So it's insane.
Certainly fascinating that a computer could parse all that stuff and kind of replicate the process that a human might go through. Right. It approaches it in a little bit of a different way. By using data versus kind of what will kind of boil down to being instinct or kind of some artistic training. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting for a computer to do, though, is to find ways to acceptably break the rules, right? Because a computer will have to work off of data, right? Mm-hmm. It'll have to work off the assumption that 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4. However, a human can say, you know what, in my world 2 + 2 is going to equal 3, and we're going to see if somehow the human mind accepts that, can be convinced that it's believable, and then create a new reality based off of that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if a computer can do that yet.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. While we're talking about rendering, I did some reading over the weekend about real-time rendering. And I don't know... I've done a lot of reading about the pipeline.
Sure.
The rendering pipeline, but this last weekend, it all kind of clicked for me. It all kind of made sense. So, do you know what the rendering pipeline is?
Well,
do you know the whole process of putting a thing and then having it show up on screen?
Some. So you're talking about even just like through like an OpenGL type of thing, or are you talking about more
traditional? For any 3D game.
Some of it, but. It depends on it. I mean, I know more about it if we're talking from a software perspective, like traditional animation, versus necessarily like game ones. So I'll call myself a very loose novice when it comes to the game side, but I have a fair understanding of how it works in software.
Sam, do you know about the pipeline? No, do you know how it all works? Do they teach you how it all works?
Like the technology behind how you get it rendered, or
like the process, like the higher all the the whole process.
Why don't you start telling us, and then we'll nod like we knew the whole time.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you all about it.
Pretend like we knew.
Here we go.
All right. So let's take Hive Jump for example, because Hive Jump is a 3D game. It looks 2D, but it's 3D.
Right.
So what it does is it has a big collection of all the models, so all the tiles, all that stuff. You feed it into the rendering pipeline, and so there's the application stage, which is like Unity. It's our game. It's where we check for input. It's where we calculate animations. It's where we calculate physics, all that stuff. So
I know all this so far.
It does all that, right?
Okay.
And it comes up with a world transform for each and every mesh that's going to appear on screen.
Okay.
So it takes every mesh in the whole game, and at the start of every frame, it basically just puts them all right at 0, 0.
Right.
That's model space.
Okay.
You understand model space. It's just everything's at 0, 0, and then the vertices are just wherever they would be, and the center of the mesh is at 0, 0 model space.
Right. So real quick, putting that into a we artist terms, is basically what it's doing is it's creating an actual polygonal mesh per thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have one of our soldier sprites, or even like, say, a red bouncing ball, it's going to map that picture of the ball, which is like a PNG file or some sort of image file, and it's going to map that to that polygon, which could be, at its simplest form, a 2-triangle square.
Right.
Right? And then each of the triangles would have a vertice, which, let's just, again, keeping it simple, there's going to be one in the top left, one in the bottom right, and then, of course, the opposite corners. And what you're saying is that red ball at the beginning of each frame is going to be mapped to 0, 0, which would be the top leftmost portion, like the origin, right? And is it mapped from the top left corner or bottom left? Or center?
It's at the center.
Okay, so it's at center.
So when you save a mesh from Maya and then you export it into Unity or whatever,
right?
0, 0 is going to be. You can set where the center point is in Maya, but for the default is the average position of all meshes.
Right.
Yeah.
So everything's
all vertices.
Everything's going to be centered and lumped on top of itself, just stacked up.
Yeah.
You with us so far too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
good.
A mesh, every vertice has just a position in space. It's 3 numbers that determine the X, Y, Z coordinate.
Got it.
And then it turns those into triangles. Right. That's a mesh.
Okay.
So at the start of every frame, it takes those meshes, puts the origin of those at 0, 0, and then it takes all those 3 numbers, the X, Y, Z, and then maps all those points, and then draws the triangles, and then there's your mesh. So that's your mesh, right?
Okay.
All of them are just lumped in the middle. And then after the application stage, it takes your world transform, and it multiplies all vertices for that mesh that are all lumped at 0, 0, and then the world transform moves them. And the world transforms it's a matrix that combines transformation movement and rotation and scaling movement.
Okay.
So you have your normal size mesh, and then multiply it by the world transform, and then it shoots off to wherever it's supposed to be, scaled, rotated.
Right.
And it does that for all the things.
So we start with our red ball,
right.
And we tell our red ball to be 50 units to the right and 50 units up, because it's going to start in the air and it wants to bounce down. And so we want it to be also at scale 100 units, X, Y, and Z, let's just say. And so that's placed our red ball with the picture and the mesh and all that kind of stuff at that position.
Right.
Okay, I'm with you.
Okay.
Sam's with you too?
Yes, but what if you have, say, you take the red ball and you move it somewhere to like 50, 60, somewhere on the grid, and you freeze transformations on it, so it's at 0, 0 wherever it is. Like, how does it determine that?
See, that's more software. John's talking about, I think, from a hardware perspective. Because you're talking about, like, in Maya, where you're basically telling it, you've moved to 50-50, and you want its origin to be reset to that spot.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if that happens as much in this.
So when you do that, that's more software, like you said. What you're doing is you're saying all these vertices are now offset by 50-50, or however you said how much it is. So the number it's actually recording when you export that mesh is whatever they would be if the origin was at 0, 0.
So it's still...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still kind of running through the process.
That data is still there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have all our meshes. They're all over the place. They're everywhere we want them to be.
Right.
And we also have our virtual camera, right? And that is also affected by a world transform. So it can be wherever we want it to be. Now, here's where it gets crazy. Everything, the origin of the world becomes the origin of the virtual camera. So it's as if we take our whole scene, keep everything where it is relative to each other, and then just slide it so the camera is at 0, 0, and it is facing negative Z, and Y is facing the top.
Okay.
So the whole thing.
Okay.
Then from there, what it has to do is it has to take the virtual camera view frustum and morph it into a unit cube, which is 1 by 1 by 1. It's a cube, length, width, height, it's all 1. So in order to do that, what it does is it multiplies all your meshes by a view transform, which takes everything and it depends on the type of camera. If you have a perspective camera, basically it doesn't have to do much. It just takes, depending on the size of the view frustum, which is just going to be a long rectangle, a long cube, anything in there, and then it's just going to kind of move everything into everything that's in. It's actually going to affect every mesh, but basically anything that's inside the camera frustum just kind of gets squeezed into this unit cube.
Okay.
And if you have a perspective camera, which, as you know, it's like we see, you know, things farther away are smaller, things closer are bigger.
Right.
It takes all the meshes, and the view transform just takes them and kind of like morphs them, so they achieve that
perspective simulation.
So all the vertices closer to the camera, the view transform affects those in a way that they kind of get bigger and stretched out, and the ones farther away get smaller. And that happens to every mesh. And then once everything is in the unit cube, then it can go through and clip all the stuff. So anything that's perfectly inside the unit cube is good, and it passes it on to the next stage, which we'll talk about. Anything that's completely outside is ignored, and everything that's kind of like halfway in the cube and then halfway out, it has to go through and create new vertices all along the edge, and then it creates a whole new mesh.
Interesting. So it's actually doing new polygonal generation based off the clipping plane?
That's right, yep.
Wacky. Can you turn that off?
No, you can't.
Wacky.
Yeah.
So that could be...
A lot of that's done from a very hardware level.
Yeah.
Like if you buy a graphic card, it's got chips in there specifically to do that. Yep.
Huh. So that's interesting to me and Sam, because controlling your vertices from a 3D modeling perspective, as far as they apply to whether it's clipping a texture or just making your mesh polygonally efficient, is something that, you know, we, you know, tirelessly analyze over, to find out that some of these graphic cards are just, I'll cut there, there, and creating new stuff is interesting.
That's what it's got to do.
Huh. Didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it, Sam.
Yeah.
Complete and total gluttony with your polygon so far, because the computer's going to do it all for you.
Yeah.
So it makes all those cuts, and then it's just left with this. You're seeing everything you're going to see on screen is just left in this unit cube. Yeah. And then what it does is it basically flattens everything. So all it does is it ignores the Z depth, and it just takes the X and Y vertice of every X and Y coordinate of every vertice, and then it passes them on to the next stage, which is going to be the rasterization phase. And a rasterization is the process of taking those vertices and then turning them into pixels. So it's and this is where it kind of gets fuzzy, but it takes all those vertices and it turns them into screen coordinates. So it now knows that the bottom left corner of the unit cube is now 0, 0, and then it has some sort of formula that it takes every vertice is now a screen coordinate based on a given window size.
Very interesting.
And then as it's calculating the triangles, it is able to know, I guess through linear interpolation, where any given point on a line for a triangle is in screen space. And then it determines, all right, this triangle is covering this pixel, and then it runs through the pixel shader, which can do anything from, you know, adding texture to that thing, and adding light calculations and all that stuff, any normal calculations, and then it just writes that color to a screen buffer, to the frame buffer, and then once it's all there, it presents the screen buffer, and then there's your frame.
Nice.
And that is done every frame for every 3D game
60 times per second, ideally.
Yes.
Cool.
That whole process.
That's why it takes so long.
Fancy sauce.
Yes.
And this can all change for non-real-time rendering. It could do things differently because it can take longer.
Yeah.
But for Hive Jump, that is what's happening every frame.
60 times a second. Cool. Awesome, man.
Running all your meshes.
Yeah. Chopping them off at the edges.
Morphs them, it does whatever it wants.
Very cool.
Goodness. Should we move on to news?
Let's hear it.
All right. The EVO tournaments have been going on. EVO fighting games.
Yeah. I haven't been following them. I've just been seeing a lot of GIFs posted online of people like freaking out when they win or lose.
That's my only exposure to EVO as well.
I didn't even know it was a thing, but I guess I'd heard of it before, but I didn't know that freaking out or celebrating in a fun way was internet worthy. But I suppose it is.
I've been following it vicariously through Rob mostly.
Yeah.
It seems like something you've been to.
Yeah.
But so I don't know who won or anything. I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
So EVO is there. I mean, it's not like a specific game. It's just like tournaments managed by this system.
Yeah.
Kind of like as FIFA is to soccer, these EVO tournaments are fighting game tournaments, but it can include any game. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or except for Smash Bros, because Nintendo will get crazy.
I suppose. Yeah. You don't want to make Nintendo angry.
But some news came out of EVO.
Okay.
Specifically Tekken 7.
Goodness.
A new Tekken 7. Last one was Tekken Tag Tournament 2.
Okay.
And now Tekken 7. And the tagline is like the final battle. Like they had this trailer and they're like, the final battle. And Heihachi's sitting there and there's lava and stuff.
Very interesting.
So, that means absolutely nothing because they're going to make Tekken 8 at some point.
Yeah. Final battle.
For now.
Final battle, nothing yet. Final battle until Tekken 8. Yeah. And then they announced 3 more Smash Bros. Characters.
Oh, yeah.
And who are they?
Captain Falcon, who's returning. And then 2 more Fire Emblem characters who I don't know who they are.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
is Fire Emblem first party Nintendo?
Yeah.
Okay. Fire Emblem came out on the GBA, right?
Yes.
I want to say, I know it had been out in Japan, but I think it made its U.S. debut on the GBA, from what I remember.
Yeah. But now they have 4 Fire Emblem characters.
Okay.
And there's still no Ridley. No Ridley, Matt Raithel.
What, you want Ridley from Metroid?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay. Ridley would be cool.
Yeah.
Is Ridley in every Metroid game?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Huh.
Maybe.
Okay, so there's definitely Samus in... When did Samus debut in Smash Brothers?
It's in the first one.
She's in the first one?
Yeah.
In 64?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, she's there.
Okay. I don't know.
I think everyone was kind of happy with the 3 that they added, though. Like, I didn't hear any complaints.
Maybe we're old,
about
John.
You were listening hard enough.
Maybe we're old.
Yeah. I know.
So, who is Ridley? Is it just you complaining that Ridley's not in, or is that kind of an internet?
No, I mean people are complaining.
Oh,
They've got so many characters in it. They pulled from a lot of different brands and franchises. I played Smash Brothers a little bit on the 64, but it's not something that I've followed up with quite that much. So I don't even know if I deserve a voice in the whole discussion. Yeah.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Sam, is there any one character that you would like to see? I mean, I'm sure you probably don't play these games.
I have no idea,
as
honestly.
religiously as people do, but
I'm just okay, they added this one, that's fine.
Yeah.
Raithel, anyone you want to see coming back?
No one in particular. They don't have any. I know they brought in Mega Man from Capcom. Mm-hmm. So seeing some of my Street Fighter characters in there would be cool. But I don't know if they would blur that line. Like, it's one thing to bring Mega Man over when it's totally not Mega Man style game. Mm-hmm. But for it to be a, quote, fighting game or even kind of a brawler and to bring in classic Capcom characters like Street Fighter characters or something could be a little bit awkward. But you never know. I mean, it could work out totally fine.
Yeah.
But if they brought in, I don't know that they would bring in one of the main characters. They might bring in somebody that's popular but not part of the original canon, like an Akuma or something like that is, not as not Ryu, not Ken, not one of the main like original 8 type of thing. Mm-hmm. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, this new one's being developed by Namco, so I'm pulling for Yoshimitsu, so we can be in 3 fighting games.
So this Smash Brothers for Wii U is being developed by Namco?
That's right, yep.
Cool.
That's why Pac-Man's in there.
Oh, makes sense. Okay. Makes good sense. Yeah. Namco does good fighting games. I mean, they've been doing Soul Calibur, I know, for a long time.
Soul Calibur, Tekken.
Tekken, sure. I like Namco. They make good stuff.
So I'm pulling for Yoshimitsu, and I'm pulling for Pushmo Guy, which is a new Nintendo thing.
Okay.
It's like a moving block puzzle.
Oh.
But you're like a little sumo man. He's adorable.
He'd be cool.
So, I mean, I think that's all the news I had prepared, which means we can move on to comments from listeners, which
Very cool.
I forgot the pad, so...
That's all right. I can do kind of just a general kind of address to comments for listeners. They're going to be more Hive Jump related, if that's cool.
That's fine.
But essentially, since the last time I was on the cast, I think we talked a little bit about Wii U for Hive Jump, still continuing with it. Lots of Nintendo fans supporting the game and excited that it's coming out to the Wii U. You can check, I had a recent interview on Always Nintendo. I think you might have mentioned on a previous cast, but
yeah, I did.
That one's posted with some of the updated art. We had a little bit of a snafu with getting old graphics posted in that interview, but that's all fixed now, so you can check Always Nintendo for Hive Jump news. Just recently pushed out a new update to the Greenlight page for Hive Jump, so if you're a Steam user, check out Hive Jump on Greenlight, or just in the general product gallery on Steam. And you can see some of the new graphics and art that we've been posting there. But overall, on that, one of the most common questions or comments is, I can't wait to play this thing, when is it coming out? So addressing that here, we're still early in development. And when I say early, we've been working on this thing now off and on for closer to 8 months now. Mm-hmm. So we've had a lot of time to push things forward on Hive Jump, but we're still doing it kind of, in off time, kind of that balancing between projects type of approach. So for those of you that are interested to play this thing very soon, the best thing you can do is help support us by getting the word out about the game. And then our eventual return to Kickstarter, which should be very soon. We're still talking about trying to return this month or early next month, is support the game that way. There's going to be a lot of very cool rewards and an opportunity to get the game at a very great price through Kickstarter. So that's the most common note that we're getting is, when can I play this thing? That's our response is, if you help support through Kickstarter, it's going to help us get this game out much, much sooner. Mm-hmm. We're still probably looking at an early next year type of release. I don't know that there's any plan or path that's going to allow us to get this game made as good as we want it to be this year. But Kickstarter is the first step. Let's help get this thing funded and moving forward at a faster pace, and then we should hopefully see this thing early next year.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Awesome.
Sam, on a scale of 0 being, oh my god, to a 10 of, whoa! How excited are you for Hive Jump to come out?
15.
15.
Wow!
John, you need to do this as a video cast, because people have not been able to appreciate your hand gestures and your excitement.
You'll get the full effect.
Yeah.
That's certainly a step forward.
2.0.
All right, on that note, I think we're going to draw this episode of IndieDev to a close. Be sure to keep your eyes out for Hive Jump Kickstarter soon.
Very soon.
We won't say when, but soon. Very soon. And thank you, Matt Raithel, and thank you, Sam Wade, for joining me on this.
Somewhat
kind of nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Not bad.
Yeah.
It's like 70. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah.
Pretty nice day here in St. Louis. And thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll be back next week with more IndieDev.